I take this opportunity to thank ATMAC management for constant encouragement and support in organizing this event. I am honored to welcome an eminent speaker on behalf of ATME College of Engineering. I welcome our resource person, Dr. Saifur Rahman, President IEEE Power and Energy Society 2018-19, Power and Director, Advanced Research Institute, USA, to this international webinar. I extend my sincere welcome to our beloved Principal, Dr. L. Basuraju, Sir, who has been a pillar support in making this institution proud and surge ahead. Thank you for joining and gracing the event, sir. I extend sincere welcome to Dean Academic Dr. Govindagoda MS and Dean Student Affairs Dr. Ratnakarji. Thank you for joining this event, sir. I sincerely, I sincerely thank Dean Research Dr. S.R. Bhagyashree for constant support and in organizing this event. I extend my profound gratitude and welcome ATME IEEE Student Branch Counselor Dr. L. Parsati sir, whose valuable advice paid for the successful organizing this event. We welcome you, sir. I also extend my welcome to heads of various departments who has extended sincere support to the webinar. I extend my gratitude and welcome all the participants from various institutes for this webinar. And I also welcome all the research scholar, faculty member of ATMAC. Thank you all. Now, I request Nazreen ma'am to introduce today's resource person. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you, Vinod. Good morning, everyone. I am Nasreen Fatima, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering. So today I am here to introduce our resource person, Professor Saifur Rahman sir. So he is a founding director of the Advanced Research Institute at Virginia Tech, USA, where he is the Joseph R. Learning Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering. He also directs the Center for Energy and Global Environment. He is a Life Fellow of the IEEE and an IEEE Millennium Medal winner. He was the President of IEEE Power and Energy Society for 2018 and 2019. He was also the founding editor-in-chief of both the IEEE Electrification Magazine and IEEE Transaction on Sustainable Energy. In 2006, he served on the IEEE Board of Directors as the Vice President for Publications. He is member at large of IEEE USA Energy Policy Committee. He is a distinguished lecturer for the IEEE Power and Energy Society and has lectured on renewable energy, energy efficiency, smart grid, electrical power system operation and planning in over 30 countries. He served as the chair of the US National Science Foundation Advisory Committee for International Science and Engineering from 2010 to 2013. He has conducted several energy efficiency related projects for Duke Energy, Tokyo Electric Power Company, the US Department of Defense, the state of Virginia, and the USA Department of Energy. Dr. Saifur Rahman has received his PhD in Electrical Engineering from Virginia Tech in 1978. His MS degree is from the Stony Brook University and has a BSc degree from Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. We are happy to have you as a part of this event, sir. Over to you, Vinod.
Yes, ma'am.
Virginia Tech, PhD Virginia Tech, MS Stony Brook, New York State, BS Bangladesh. I have been IEEE member since 1975, fellow 98, life fellow 2014, now the PES president. I have done a lot of publication related activities. I have started an EIC of 2 journals. I started a magazine as well, and an open source journal, which I'll talk about later.
ಇಲ್ಲೇ ಕಾಲೇಜಲ್ಲಿ ನಡೆಸ್ತಾರೆ.
Application is my background. This is the audience. I normally speak face to face in many conferences on the same topic. This was done in Bangalore, India, sometime back. So after this session was over, people come to ask a lot of questions. So the reason I'm putting it on the screen, I'm expecting you'll have a lot of questions since I'm not there physically for me to talk to you face to face. Please put the questions in the chat box and we'll get to that toward the end. Okay. Now, this is how I'm starting. The 2 basic questions about writing a paper. One, some people do this. Are you writing this paper for the sake of writing? That means you want to impress somebody so that you write a paper and tell him that you have a paper. Sometimes we write paper to a conference because we want to visit that city. Conferences is secondary. We want to visit X city, that is our attraction to us. Or more scholarly approach is, do you want to show how others can benefit from your work? This is, I think, a scholarly approach. I have done some work. I believe it is useful. I would like to share my results, my algorithm, my methodology, so that others can benefit from this work. And this is how most people, or how and why most people write papers. Okay. So who is your audience and who writes papers? This is a group that we deal with. Engineers, scientists, educators come from corporations, academia, government, of course. We have members from all 3 segments in PES. Many cases, like in my case, my students write papers with me and present this paper or these papers at a conference before submitting to journals. Because journal papers are more complete, have more results and more in-depth discussion. So to get some practice, many of my students, in fact all of them, write papers first for a conference and then get some feedback. Coming back from the conference with feedback, they sit down and enhance the paper, enlarge the coverage, has more results, and then submit to a journal. That's how we get the process done. So on the other side of the table, you are the writer, you're the author, you have submitted the paper. Now it goes to a journal website, goes to the chief editor, EIC, for that journal, and they have a different way of looking at your paper. Here is the list. First question they ask is the content you are covering in your paper is appropriate, meaning you're writing a paper on some high-level software programming algorithm. You submit that to IEEE transactions and power systems. That is not appropriate because we are not focusing on high-level algorithms. We use them sometimes, but it's not what we publish, number 1. Second is scope. Scope meaning even though you are writing a paper on power systems and you are submitting it to the IEEE transactions on sustainable energy, for example. Even though same society, same coverage, but it's not the right scope. If you are writing a paper on smart grid, go to the journal on smart grid, not the journal on sustainable energy. And then level. The paper must be of high enough level so that the reader get some value out of it. A very basic level, very general, then this paper has no value to our audience. This is how the first cut happens. If the paper does not meet these requirements, the paper will be returned without review. That's bullet one. Well, once the chief editor accepts the paper, that it meant it covered these three filters. It is appropriate, it is in scope, and at proper level. Done. Then the reader, the EIC in this case, will ask this question: is the material written clearly, and is it original, meaning it has not been published elsewhere? It could be extension of previously published work. We do that all the time. That doesn't mean we always start something from fresh. We cannot, because body of research is much bigger than a paper. Bullet number 4, does the set of methods you are presenting is acceptable in the community, meaning it is an algorithm that we are used to applying in, let's say, load forecasting. And it must be rational, meaning we are approaching load forecasting using different algorithms, and that's fine. Then the question, again, the EIC is asking, are the illustrations, tables, graphs are relevant to the text? In other words, you put a graph and don't explain what the graph does, then we don't see the relevance. And of course, at the end, you have always a list of references. We have to make sure, the EIC has to make sure the references are current, not you are referring a paper 50 years ago. Sometimes you do because of very highly rated paper. In fact, my most cited paper that I get citations even today was published in 1989, so 30 years ago. That happens. That's not unusual, but mostly you look at papers that are current and relevant to what your topic is. So those are the filters that the chief editor looks at before the paper goes to the editors for review. Okay. Now, how does the review process work? The reason I'm saying all this, as you write the paper, if you can address these issues before you submit it, is a better chance of the paper being accepted. That's why I'm putting this list for you. First of all, what's the process? The chief editor and the PA staff get the paper. After the paper goes through what is called content match check. That is, I authenticate. We want to make sure the paper, the text you are submitting is new, is different. It could be some link to some existing material, but not all of it copied from someone else, number one. Number two, IEEE and many other societies and journal offices have what is known as banned author list. For many reasons, author can be banned. So if an author submits a paper and his or her name is on the banned list, paper would not be further reviewed. That's the mechanical check. Now the second bullet, if the paper is in scope for the journal and it meets all the other things we talked about, like level, appropriate on the top bullet on this page, then the chief editor or the EIC will send the paper to an editor who is a domain expert on that topic. We use the term editor. Some journals use the term associate editor, same thing. Since the editor is a person with domain knowledge, he or she will have a list of reviewers that they use to review papers. Typically, when your paper is received, it will be sent to 5 or more reviewers for detailed written comment. Once reviewers get the paper, that usually takes a month or so, after which they will send their reviews back to the editor. Editor reads those reviews. Sometimes reviews are in two different directions. Some say paper is fine, go ahead, publish it. Some say paper has weaknesses, Some say paper is nothing new, don't publish it. Well, I've seen that happening in the same paper, has three kinds of reviews. It is then falls on the editor to judge which way he or she will go. He can take the opinion of a couple of reviewers if they're strong and they have a good reason that this paper is not a valid paper for the journal, so it should be rejected. He or she can take that opinion. Or second opinion is paper has some merit, but it needs more work, and these are the following things we, the reviewer, like the author to address. Option 2. That's, if you look at that at the bottom, reject, revise, resubmit, accept. And third group could be accept. So based on the editor's comment, based on the reviewer's comments, the editor will make a judgment and make a recommendation to the chief editor, EIC, one of the three: accept, revise and resubmit, or reject. If reject is done, paper goes back to you without any further action. If it is revise and resubmit, then you are told what you need to do to make it better. Sometimes it is accepted as it is, which is very rare. In fact, I personally like in my paper going for review that it comes back with a revise and resubmit recommendation than accept. Why? Because if I get revise and resubmit, I get some comments from reviewers who are experts in the field, and that way if I address their comments, my paper is better. So I prefer revise, resubmit as opposed to straight out acceptance. Once the chief editor EIC receives these recommendations from the editor and sees in writing what the reviewers have said, he or she makes a final decision. Sometimes the override or what the editor had said. For example, the editor said reject based on some reviews. EIC sees the editor's recommendation and reads all the other 5, 6 reviews. And he or she, the EIC, might feel the editor was, I guess, not fully aware of what's going on and made a recommendation to reject. So the EIC in some cases will override the editor. Typically, they'll discuss the editor first and change the reject, because you have not seen the reject yet. It is with the EIC. It is not in your box yet. So he might change the editor's recommendation reject to revise resubmit and goes in. Anyway, once it is done, the editor EIC reaches a decision, accept, revise, or reject. He or she will communicate that to the author. The author sees that, based on what is there, or the author will take an action. Typically, if it is revised and resubmit, you're given a deadline. Please resubmit the paper with the changes as requested within typically a month you get. And then it's up to you to work on it. So now the question is, suppose you got a reject decision. And why does it happen? They will say or give you some reasons why it is rejected, but if you know in advance why papers get rejected, you can address that in advance yourself before submitting it, then your paper is a better product, has a higher chance of being accepted. First, I said already, the content is not a good fit for the publication. You write a paper on algorithm development and submit to IEEE transactions on power system. Not a good fit. Sometimes there are serious flaws, meaning the results are inconclusive, and sometimes the results have incorrect interpretation. For example, you're writing a paper on load forecasting, and you said that the load is high because outside temperature is high on a hot summer day. If you stop there, it is not complete and maybe incorrect, because on a hot summer day, the building load is a stronger function of the humidity and the building occupancy level than the outside temperature. In that case, if you said the load is high because of outside temperature, that is incorrect interpretation. It is not complete. That's an example. Sometimes it happens rarely, the research is fraudulent. That means you wrote something that your experiment indicates this kind of results, but you were not fully, I guess, serious. You did not do all the possible checks and balances, and you made a recommendation. You showed some results based on research that is not complete, or it is wrong in some cases. Third bullet, the paper can be rejected because it is poorly written. That means the editors, the reviewers have difficulty figuring out what you're trying to say. Sometimes the author may address a very narrow problem which does not have any meaning beyond their lab. So that is what we say here. The paper does not address a big enough problem or advance the scientific field where other people can benefit from. Next item, papers get rejected. Most of the work was previously published. So what's the point of another paper? Because we know what the other papers have said on the same topic. Sometimes we reject because everything is fine, it is well written, it is addressing a big enough problem, but the quality of the paper is not good enough for the journal. As you know very well, there are many journals on the same topic, and they have different impact factors. I'll talk to impact factor later on in more detail. So if you go to a journal like the Science magazine, impact factor more than 30. You write a paper which is not very highly relevant. So even the paper is okay, but the quality of the paper you are submitting is not good enough for the standard of that journal. So that's something you got to be careful reviewing papers yourself. If you decide to write a paper on a topic, find some journals which are relevant, and then see what kinds of papers they publish. If it's a high impact factor journal, your quality must be high to reach that level of EIC and editor standards. And finally, this happens once in a while because of the way you wrote the paper. Reviewers misunderstood what you said. So they may have said the content of a paper does not address big enough problem because they didn't appreciate the work you have done. So that is, I think, your shortcoming because you did not express yourself well, or the paper was poorly written, so the editors and reviewers missed the point, which is very unfortunate, but that happens once in a while. Again, my point is, look at these items carefully, like a checklist. Before you submit the paper, you make sure these items are addressed so you have a higher chance of getting accepted. Okay, so now these are the basic building blocks. Now we talk about how the paper should be set up, structure. A paper must have, in general, these following 8 sections, let's say. Title, of course, abstract, keywords, introduction, methodology, research, discussions, findings is the biggest part, conclusion, and references. Results are not conclusion. Results are results. You see an experiment, results. Conclusion means what does it mean? That you conclude these results mean this. We'll get to that in a few minutes. And this, of course, references. So, title. How do you set the title up? This is very important because the title will grab the reader's attention. So a good title answer the reader's question, is this article, based on the title alone, relevant to me? Should I read this paper? And then you have to describe the content of the paper using fewest possible words. Should be crisp, concise, use a few keywords, and avoid jargon. Meaning, you want to attract the reader's attention, but not make the title too long. As I said to many people, I've seen papers where the title has 30 words, almost looks like an abstract. My cutoff is, no more than 12 to 15 words, maybe 12 is better in the title. But each word must have a meaning. They must contain some keywords. That's the title. Now, paper, this is an example of a good title and a bad title. Title do's and don'ts. The top one, I say check mark, a human expert-based approach to electrical peak demand management. Every word has a meaning. The same paper, I've seen similar title, the second one, again, same paper. I give you the title I like on the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9 words. Second is a better approach of managing environmental and energy sustainability via a study of different methods of electric load forecasting problems. I highlight this. Yes, why do you do load forecasting? Because you want to manage the building and the power system so that it is energy efficient. That's the purpose. But you don't need to say the purpose behind the load forecasting. The paper is on load forecasting. Why you are doing load forecasting? That is something the editor, the reviewer, and the reader will figure out once they begin to read the paper. That's one issue. Do not give the second tier meaning in the title. Other word here, the second word, a better approach. The better word is an opinion, is not something that is backed by fact. You feel it is a better approach. So I would not use the word better in a title, because then I am telling the author, telling the reviewer and the reader what he or she should think about my paper. No, let them judge, better or worse. It's not for you to tell them. Again, point is, in the title, do not use a word that is judgmental and that is like the energy sustainability is a second tier meaning. Do not use second tier meaning, be direct. Human expert-based approach, because you are telling them many approaches, could be statistical approach, could be machine learning approach, with neural net, many things. You're telling them my approach is human expert-based. Done. And what am I doing? I am doing electrical peak demand forecast. That's it. Done. So that's the difference between, in my judgment, my opinion, good or a not so good title. Okay, abstract. An abstract is a standalone, condensed version of the article. Standalone meaning, do not say that in the abstract, reference 1 said this. That means if I do not read reference 1, I don't know what you're talking about. So never in the abstract put references that number 1, 5, 6 like this. Never do that. That's why I say it is standalone, meaning it must make sense by itself without referring to anything else. Number 1. Number 2, typically we keep it 250 words or less. You can use present or past tense. I prefer past tense, it is done. And use keywords and index terms. Now, if you look at the green, yellow, purple, and red boxes, what you did, a couple of sentences in the abstract. Why you did it? Well, I did a load forecasting model. Why you did it? Because load forecast is useful for the power company to manage their network. On the right-hand side, the red box, how the results were useful, important, and move the field forward. You got an algorithm for load forecasting, error under 3%. Very good. They help them to move forward. And then bottom left, the purple box, why your results are useful and important to move the field forward. Again, as you know, we are talking about 3, 4 sentences, maybe 2 sentences each. You stay within 250 words. Why is that important? Because if you want people to find your paper using a search engine, could be IEEE Explore, could be Google, whatever it is, the search engine does not look at the whole paper. They look at the title, sometimes keywords, and the abstract. So that's how your paper is discovered. So if you want people to read your paper, which you want, otherwise why write it, make sure it is discoverable based on what you want to highlight, and therefore once it is discoverable, the reader reads your paper, they find the abstract interesting, then they decide to download. Sometimes they're going to pay to download a full paper. So why should they pay if they are not interested? So that's important that you look at the abstract very, very carefully. Okay, here is it. Here is the abstract. Again, don't have to read the whole thing. There's an abstract for my paper I wrote on human expert-based approach to electrical peak demand management. This paper, this abstract that was done as a final version, I had a student work on this paper to start off. When I work with my students to write papers, work is done, research is done, results are here. We sit down together and I outline for the student how the paper should be written, how it should be highlighted. The student, the real story, the student took that, and in this case is a man, he went away and came back with the abstract, which is the lower half of the paper. So it says the paper presents and assesses a framework for an engineering capstone design program. That's what he thought he was doing. The thing I'm highlighting here, we explain, next we describe the importance, we comment. These are not acceptable. In other words, as I said before, abstract is condensed, and in abstract you do not use first person. Never say we, I, you. It says a project was explained. It was described. It was mentioned. Don't say we comment. Please be careful on this so that we are not using any first person in the abstract, in fact, not in the paper at all. Okay, keywords. Keywords are used in the title, as you said already, in the abstract, and helps for search engine optimization. So keywords, typically 6, 8, maybe 10 keywords. In IEEE papers, we put the title first, then the author name and affiliation, then the abstract. Below the abstract is a set of keywords. So they must be logical, meaning in a paper on load forecasting, you should not talk about machine design. They must be appropriate, meaning they must be relevant. They must be applicable, meaning if you talk about load forecast, you can talk about ambient temperature, the historical load, the system size, the building activity. That's applicable. Then specific. Then what are you talking about? Well, they're talking about ambient temperature, dry bulb. Talking about humidity. Talking about solar radiation, because if it's sunny and hot, building will get warmer because of direct sunshine. This is a list of specific items. And finally, searchable, because you put those words which are part of the paper, and then the paper will be found by a search engine based on those keywords. So that's what we mean by search engine optimization. Okay, next page. Talked about title, talked about abstract. Let's talk about introduction. It's very important. Look at the 4 blue boxes. We talk about, it's not what you did, because introduction means you are telling the audience, I wrote the paper because of this. That means we know something about load forecasting. We have seen some results on electric power load forecasting. However, I find some gaps. Maybe the results I see in the literature are not very, very strong in terms of errors. Maybe the error is 6-7%. I can do better. But then you see a hypothesis I have done this work using more variables to make the forecast more tighter and more relevant, and I got better results. And then say how the article is organized. Last part in the introduction, typically the last 2-3 sentences. I have my methodology, my results, discussion, and the like. Typically, should not be too broad or vague, 1 to 2 pages, and written in present tense, not past tense, present tense. Okay, next page. Then the methodology. What is the method or set of methods you are using to achieve your goal? Well, you formulate the problem, meaning I want to forecast peak load demand for a network, for a power system, next 24 hours. You formulate some structures, what variables you need, temperature, occupancy, time of day, day of week, humidity, solar radiation, sometimes wind speed. Do that. A methodology uses many elements, tables, you know that is, figures, and graphs. So that more of these things you put in, it helps to make the paper easily understood. Now, next is results and discussion. Results and results, they are not discussions, 2 things. It demonstrates that you have solved the problem and made significant advances. What are results? They summarize the data that you have collected, and you don't give the whole data set in the paper, you don't have that much space. Typically in PES, we have 8-page limit for papers, so you cannot have a lot of space to put a lot of numbers. Typically, rather than giving a lot of data sets, we put figures and tables with narratives and figures to explain what we meant. This is the results. Next is discussion. Discussion is not results. It interprets the results. It tells you what results mean. That's very important. So that this is where your contribution comes in. You are saying these numbers I saw means this for me. For example, again, electric power load forecasting. You'll say that I ran my experiment, did the model, got the results, and I am finding in most cases my load demand is correlated most strongly with the outside ambient temperature. That's a discussion. So you explain that. That's the difference between discussion and results. Then conclusion. Conclusion is conclusion. That means you explain, you are not putting results in here. No, results is done, separate section. You explain what your research has achieved as it relates to the problem stated in the introduction. You talk about key points in each section. For example, you found the temperature ambient outside is the most relevant variable for load. That's one of the findings. And then also, sometimes you don't solve the whole problem at a time. So you point out benefits and shortcomings of the solution represented. For example, you can say, I get very good results for weekday afternoons load forecast, but my shortcoming is these results are not so good if I go on weekends and holidays. You point it out. Somebody might take that work and expand that for weekend situations, maybe weekends because of the lower occupancy and few other things are different. That's a pointer where you are guiding the next author to research. And you have a research methodology, maybe using neural network for your application. Maybe it works in some cases, sometimes it does not. And then you suggest future research areas based on the shortcomings and the incompleteness you have done. Point is, a paper is not the end of the world. It is not solving the whole world's problem. There are shortcomings, there are undone things, there are things that need more attention. Point that out. That's good enough. And then the reviewer would understand that you get the full picture. Okay. References are very clear. You pick the references, they are relevant to your work. There's no limit to the number of references. Typically, I use 30 or so as a guidance, because if you have 100 references, you're using 3 pages out of 8, you don't have enough space left to do your model discussion. Again, when you do a reference, make sure the way you cite it will allow the reader to find the reference using your information. So you have to have author name, article title, year publisher, of course, IEEE Transactions and Power Systems, an example, year published, volume and page number. Sometimes these days, we also assign DOI, a digital object identifier. With a DOI number, you can find the paper without anything else, without the author name, article title, publish, all that. So I typically put both, because people are used to finding articles based on the author, title, and so on and so forth. For example, if I want to see a paper on load forecasting by a given author, I go to IEEE Explore, put the title, topic, load forecasting, and Mr. John Doe, put that name. Then the IEEE Explorer will give me all the papers on load forecasting that John Doe published in IEEE. Good enough. The DOI is a long set of digits, 16 characters, I think, and it's not easy to remember all the time. Okay, moving on. This is a very important issue. Who should be on the author's list? I get this question all the time. There's a difference between a report and a paper. The report documents in detail the work done, including results for a project, and has a lead author and many other authors who worked on that project. Could be a 2-year-long project, maybe 10, 12 students, faculty worked on this. So all of their list names should be on the list of authors because they took part in the project and helped write the report. That's the report. A technical paper, on the other hand, highlights one or more aspects of a report, not the whole report, number one. As a result, multiple papers can come out of one report. It happens all the time. Therefore, when you write a paper, include any and all who have contributed to the writing of the paper. Contributed. They are not project team members. They could be a member, but you took a part of the project work and write a paper yourself. You're the lead author. And work, make sure you put the name of the people who wrote parts of the paper. Somebody might give an idea over lunch. Somebody might share some data with you for your paper. Fine. You can acknowledge them in the paper at the end before the reference section starts. That's fine. But they are not authors of the paper. Be very careful. I see papers with 10 authors, 9 authors. I don't think 10 people wrote the paper. It's very unlikely. Okay, now ethics. Types of misconduct that we are very careful in IEEE. First is conflict of interest. A financial or other relationship with the publication can be at odds with the unbiased presentation of data. For example, you got funding from a company who markets a switchgear device. They funded the research. That's fine. They give the research, write the paper, but if you are talking about the company and the product name and the product application, then there's a conflict. That means this paper you're writing is advertising the company's product because you got some funding from them. That is not acceptable. Second is missing author attribution on the right-hand side. If you use another author's ideas in your article, even if you do not source a paper that he or she wrote, you must give attribution, meaning this idea came from this source. Sometimes we get ideas through discussions, not in a paper. So you can put that in the reference list, like reference number 16. You'll say personal communication communication with X and Y on this date. That's fine. That means you recognize that this idea came from this person, not from you. Important. And finally, of course, plagiarism, is we know what all that means. You copy other people's work, word for word, or paraphrase without proper citation. That's why we pass every paper through I-Authenticate, making sure it is not a target of plagiarism. We do that all the time. Okay. Ethical publishing, that was the author issue. Ethical publishing, cite and separate any verbatim copied material. You can copy from another source. You want to make a point that they did some excellent work in load forecasting and this is the result. Copy 3-4 lines. But you cannot copy one whole page. Then it's not your content. So that's the judgment issue. Paraphrase, I prefer to paraphrase than quote directly because I have to tell my reader what I understood from reading that paper, not quote them. That's paraphrasing. And of course, you should cite where is the source of this idea. Credit any ideas from other sources, talked about this already. And then please make sure you know IEEE policies on this topic. This is on the blue thing on the right-hand side. There's a PDF file, a tip sheet, which talks about all these issues I just discussed right now. So, other things you have to be careful. Obvious, this material must not have appeared elsewhere for publication, appeared. Number one. Number two, it is not under review for another refereed publication. Very, very important. Sometimes to get a better luck, I guess, a better output, an author may submit the same paper to 2 journals for review, and one comes back with a positive answer. He will then or she will then tell the other journal, I withdraw this. This is not fair because in submitting the same paper to 2 places, you have engaged their reviewers, the editors, their staff, and then you withdraw one of them. It's not fair. So do not send one paper to 2 places at the same time. Okay, so that's number 2. Number 3, cites previous work. Again, it is very unlikely the work you are doing is absolutely new and nobody has touched it before. It is not possible. So you are building on something. So that is a citation issue. That will also lead you to make sure to clearly identify how the work that you are citing differs from what you are doing that you're trying to publish. Sometimes a paper comes back to the author with reject recommendation. It's done. Sometimes you look at the rejection, look at the results, reviewer comments, and say, well, I can fix it. Typically, we don't submit to the same journal, but you can. But if you decide to improve the paper, even if it is rejected, and send back to the same journal, please inform the editor that this was either submitted or it is based on previously published work, so that when they review it, they don't reject it because I saw it before. You did see it before, I know that. It is rejected, I know. I want you to know it is rejected, but I have made it better. Say that. Okay. So this is something new, ORCID. It's a bit called author disambiguation. I typically write as an author my name S. Rahman. There are dozens of S. Rahman. So which Rahman is writing this paper? That's called author disambiguation. So in order to make sure that it is Saifur Rahman, Virginia Tech, EC department and all that, they have now the 16-digit identifier, which identifies me as a unique person. So it has my employment, education, publication record in the ORCID database. Nowadays, IEEE requires, and many others, that you put an ORCID number when you submit a paper in the database. So they know who you are. And because without ORCID, we cannot tell which S. Rahman is writing this paper. So, again, if you want to know more, visit ORCID, ORCID, IEEE.cid.org website. More data is there. Important because as of July 2016, all corresponding authors of IEEE journal are required to link their profile to an ORCID ID. Look at that. It is all corresponding authors must have ORCID ID, otherwise paper will not be accepted for review. And all the other co-authors receive email ID prompting them, email on their email ID, prompting them to create an ORCID ID. That maybe my student is a corresponding author, so he or she gets the request, or she has to provide their ORCID number, ORCID ID, to submit it. But then how does the system know that which S. Raman they're talking about? They will, as you know, when you submit a paper for a journal or public or a conference, you must give all the authors and co-authors email ID. So all of them get a email for ORCID ID information. Okay, where to publish? There are 3 types of journals that you know. Traditional journal, like we have 5 of them: power delivery, power system, smart grid, and so on. The one set. The libraries or users pay money to get those journal access, usually online now. Then open access journal. Open access means they're open to the public, to the world, but you as the author have to pay so that your payment covers the cost of publication. Third group is hybrid journals, meaning they are hybrid, meaning they have traditional content and some open access content. That's done in IEEE. So in our case, for example, open access, IEEE has a journal called IEEE Access. Open access, very well known. A lot of people write on that in that journal now. So it's fully open access, IEEE. For PES, we have 2 options now. We have a full open access, option 1, which is a new journal called IEEE Open Access Journal of Power and Energy. It is new, or renamed in fact. Start publishing from January next year, 2020. It is a renaming, or rearranging the current journal called Open Access Journal of Power and Energy Technology Systems, PATS journal. That is rebranded with this new name, Open Access Journal of Power and Energy. It covers the whole scope of PES for both practice-oriented and academic articles. What do you mean by practice-oriented? Sometimes a company engineer has a good process that is saving money, time of their employees to do certain things. That's practice-oriented. They may not have any transfer function, they may not have integration, that's fine. So this is how we look at it. There is a fee, of course, but article processing charge, we are charging now $1,350. This is lower than the market price. In addition to the lower price, we each year will give subsidy to 10 to 15 papers, articles, depending on the author's ability to pay or not pay. Maybe the author cannot pay $30, maybe they can pay only $500 for some countries, which will look at it, use that information, decide whether we can accept $500 fee as opposed to $350 for this paper. So keep working on this, and this is on our website, Open Access Journal of Power and Energy. Second option is in IEEE Access. IEEE Access now has a dedicated section on power and energy. IEEE Access covers all of IEEE field, everything, electronics, computers, communications, signal processing, all of that. We have a section now which will start in January, but papers are now being accepted for review. We have 3 PES appointed editors for that section, and there is IEEE fee. This fee is more than our fee, $1,750, but that's up to you. If you want to go there, it's okay. But IEEE Access is a fairly good impact factor now. So this is a good place to publish if you want to. Okay, impact factor, you just mentioned this. Sometimes I feel that we depend too much on the impact factor because it is the widely known metric. What is the impact factor? Make sure that you're using the right impact factor. There are multiple impact factor metrics being in the market today. This is the one we follow. Impact factor from the journal citation report. This is very well known. Thomson Reuters publishes this once a year. So in my judgment, impact factor is not enough of a metric. Other things you should look at. Maybe impact factor is not that very high, maybe 2 or 3, but it may be well known in the community of that research field. Could be community of smart grid. So you look at that as well. That means, are many people in smart grid community publishing in this journal? For new journals, there's an impact factor. It takes 3 years of life of a journal to qualify to get an impact factor. So what happens in the 3 years in between, from 0 to 3 years? What I suggest, look at the board of editors of that journal. Very well-known people in the community, in the field, you'd expect they must have high standards. So board and their reputation is important. Other ways of judging a journal's value to the community, IEEE uses this, number of downloads. If paper is good, regardless of the impact factor, it will be used by many people. They'll download it for a fee or from library sources, and that's very important. And second is patent citations. The paper is very relevant to some work. The patent attorneys will cite that paper as a background information for the patent under review. So again, not just impact factor, other things are important, downloads as well as patent citations. So what is next? Follow up. This is a summary of what I said so far. Process of writing the paper. First of all, it is usually a team effort, not just yourself, maybe two, yourself and your professor and vice versa. But this, you have done the research, got some good results, discuss the content. What is highlight, what is standing out from your work? Number one. Number two, do literature research. Make sure that what you have found and want to talk about is not done already by somebody else. Then, again, there are multiple steps here. Not the same person writes everything. Could be a team of 3 students and a professor. So somebody does literature research. Somebody writes the description of the experiment. Somebody writes the results and discussion. Then the conclusion. And then we put all that together with your professor, in this case, some could be industry engineer, same thing. These are the components: literature search, experiment, results, conclusion, collect it and prepare the draft. Then all members will comment on the draft so that something was missing, results are not fully discussed, maybe you missed a couple of relevant references, put all that together, make the draft, everybody comments, and once the comments are back, you produce the final copy, and then you submit for publication based on the things I discussed at the beginning. So that's it. I've got a few minutes left. Any questions? I'll be happy to answer either in writing or later on after the hour is up.
Okay. I request participants who are having any questions, we can submit in the query form, which will be communicated back to your email ID. I thank Dr. Saiful Rahman sir for his valuable insights about preparation of paper, drafting, and structure of the paper. So now I request Dr. Mohammad Nadim sir to render the vote of thanks.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, one and all. I, Dr. Mohammad Nadim M, Assistant Professor, Department of Mechanical Engineering, deem it a great honor and privilege to propose the vote of thanks on this occasion. As we have come to the last stage of today's webinar on importance of citations and indexing, to express the gratitude to all the gathered here. First and the foremost, I would like to express my sincere thanks wholeheartedly to our speaker, Dr. Saifur Rahman, for enlightening us on significance and importance of citations and indexing, which will be one of the most important parameters for the research scholars and academicians. On behalf of entire ATME family, I thank you for your kindness, interest for sharing your knowledge and valuable time with us, sir. My heartful thanks to our entire management, our beloved principal, Dr. L. Baswaraj, who has advised and support to conduct this program. I would like to express my sincere thanks to convener of this event, Dr. Parthasarthi L, and all the coordinators who actively involved to execute this program. I owe special gratitude to Dr. Bhagyashree SR, Research Dean, for her unstinted support for the conduction of this event. I also would like to thank our respected deans and HODs of various departments for their active support and participation. I would like to express my special thanks to all the distinguished invitees, my dear colleagues and participants from various institutions present here and supporting us to make this event successful and fruitful. Thank you, one and all.
Gentle reminder to all the participants. So the participants, if you find any questionnaire about citation and indexing, a query form, that is a Google form, will be shared, which will be communicated to your email ID, where you can raise the questions and you can submit back to us. Thank you.